This lesson is on reverse distributive property, also known as the greatest common factor. Again, this should be review. The process of factoring by removing the greatest common factor can be best stated as the reverse distributive property. In the distributive property, one is multiplying a certain factor to all the terms. In factoring by the greatest common factor, one is dividing all of the terms by the greatest common factor. So you'll notice in our first example that we have a trinomial, and we need to find what's in common with all of those terms. So first we're going to look at the numbers. So 14, 24, and 30, and 2 is in common. And then we need to look at what's in common with the variables. So we have x to the 8th, x to the 7th, and x to the 3rd. I'm sorry, those are z's. It's funny, I do that a lot. So the way that you find what's in common is, remember, z to the 8th means you have 8 z's being multiplied. Z to the 7th means you have 7 z's being multiplied. And z to the 3rd means you have 3 z's being multiplied. So how many do you have in common? Well, you have 3 in each of them. So 2z to the 3rd is your greatest common factor. And now you need to divide each of them, each term, by 2z to the 3rd. So when we divide 14z to the 8th by 2z to the 3rd, we get 7z to the 5th. Remember, when you're dividing and they have the same variable, you're subtracting the exponents, okay? So that's why 8 of them, we divided out 3, which leaves us with 5, okay? Because we're subtracting those exponents. 24z to the 7th divided by, and these are divided by signs, 2z to the 3rd is 12z to the 4th. Negative 30z to the 3rd divided by 2z to the 3rd. Well, 3 minus 3 is 0. Anything to the 0 power is 1, so our variable is gone. So now we just have negative 15. The biggest mistake people make with the greatest common factor is they give me the answer. They forget to put the greatest common factor in front. If you don't put it there, it is not correct. The idea with factoring is to write an equivalent expression in factored form, okay? So this example that we were given has to equal our factored form, okay? So if there is nothing in common, then your expression is prime. And you always want to make sure what is left inside the parentheses cannot be factored any further. So this trinomial cannot be factored any further. Hopefully you can see that. All right, so why don't you give the 2 at the bottom a try and continue the video when you're ready. All right, here are your answers. In the first one, if you find it difficult to figure out what the greatest common factor is for all those numbers, here's a little hint. Grab your calculator. If you're on a calculator page and you go to Menu, Number, Factor, it will not factor variables, but it'll factor our numbers. So if I put in 18, all right, and then I arrow up on top of it, hit Enter, and then I put in 48, arrow up on top of it, 56, arrow up on top of it, 86. Right off the bat, I notice they all have a 2 in common, and that's it. That's all they have in common is a 2. The first 2 have a 3 in common, but the last 2 don't. The last one, 86, it only has factors of 2 and 43. So 2 is the only number in common. Okay, so that's a cool way to find out or help you find out what's in common. So they only had 2x in common, so I divided it out. I divided each term by 2x, and this is what I was left with, this polynomial in blue. Now you'll notice in the maroon color, I said that if that first term is negative, the GCF must be negative. Please, please, please do that. Your life will be a whole heck of a lot easier if you do that. Is it wrong if you don't? No, but you might miss factoring more. So what's left in parentheses might still be able to be factored, but you might not recognize its form because you didn't take out that negative. So I highly recommend that. You'll notice I have two lines because I, didn't take out the greatest common factor. I thought it was a 5. So when I took it out, I noticed, they still had a 3 in common. So when I take out the 3, I'm multiplying it by whatever's out here. So negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. Oops, I should have taken a negative 15 out of there. D squared minus 3. 3 is not a perfect square, so I cannot factor any further. Done. Good luck. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.